Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard. Today I turn the camera over to you, the Hollywood Graveyard community, as we travel the world to visit famous and historical graves in your neck of the woods. Today we make our way south to find legends like Martin Luther King Jr., George Washington, Priscilla Lane, Kenny Rogers, and many more. My friends, the time is yours. We left off our last famous grave tour video filmed by you in Washington, D.C. So today we continue our southward trajectory, making stops in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, and finally, Louisiana. Let's begin today in Virginia, at the Mount Vernon estate, to find the tomb of the man known as the Father of the United States, George Washington. The founding father was appointed as commander of the Continental Army in 1775, leading Patriot forces to victory during the American Revolutionary War. He then served as president of the Constitutional Convention, which drafted the Constitution of the United States. And of course you know, he was elected the very first president of the United States in 1789, setting many of the precedents we know today, like the peaceful transfer of power and the two-term tradition, as well as avoiding any image of a monarchy or dictatorship. Washington did not seek a third term for many of these reasons, and passed away a few years later in 1799 from a brief illness. He was 67. He was initially entombed in this family vault, but decades later, in 1831, he and his wife Martha were moved to this newly constructed tomb. Washington consistently ranks among America's greatest presidents and is an icon of American culture. Not far north of where America's first president is buried is Arlington National Cemetery, the largest cemetery in the United States National Cemetery System, a hallowed place where rest hundreds of thousands of veterans and other national figures. We've visited Arlington several times in past videos, but there's always more to discover in these grounds, where the history runs deep. Here we find an actress and singer named Priscilla Lane. She began her career singing in a group with her sisters known as the Lane Sisters. Priscilla made her way to the big screen in 1937's Varsity Show. She'd go on to have key roles in films like The Roaring Twenties, Saboteur, and perhaps most notably as Elaine in Arsenic and Old Lace alongside Cary Grant. She retired from film in 1948 and passed away from lung cancer at age 79. There are also a few presidents here at Arlington, including William Howard Taft. He was the 27th President of the United States, serving from 1909 to 1913, and would later serve as a Chief Justice. After his death in 1930 at age 72, he'd be the first President and first Supreme Court Justice buried here at Arlington. Wayne Morris was a decorated World War II fighter ace who went on to thrill audiences on the big screen. Perhaps his best-known role is playing Lieutenant Roget in 1957's Paths of Glory. He'd also play the title role in Kid Galahad in 1937. And television appearances include on shows like Gunsmoke and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Wayne was just 45 when he died from a coronary occlusion while aboard an aircraft carrier. Read the epitaph of Bill Mauldin here and you'll learn that he was a cartoonist. He's best known for his work in World War II cartoons, often depicting American soldiers in the form of archetypal characters Willie and Joe. His work would earn him 2 Pulitzer Prizes and would be popular among servicemen abroad, as well as civilians at home. Bill died from complications of Alzheimer's and an accidental bathtub scalding at the age of 81. A familiar face to television audiences in the 50s and 60s was the host of a popular game show called What's My Line? In the columbarium here at Arlington, we find the niche of John Daly. He began his career on radio and television as a journalist and reporter before landing the role for which audiences remember him today. He hosted the game show What's My Line for some 17 years, beginning in the 1950s. The show often featured celebrities where the blindfolded panel had to guess who the celebrity was, and hilarity ensued. John died of cardiac arrest at age 77. Next up here we find Jack Valenti, whose epitaph also gives us a clue as to who he was. Jack was a longtime president of the Motion Picture Association, Under his tenure, the MPAA film rating system was created, featuring the familiar G, PG, PG-13, R, and NC-17 ratings we know today. He was also an ardent supporter of the rights of the film community, lobbying for copyright safeguards. He died at age 85 from complications of a stroke. If you enjoy watching the Thin Man movies of the 30s with William Powell and Myrna Loy, then you'll likely know the name Dashiell Hammett. He was an author of those iconic hard-boiled detective and mystery novels, stories, and screenplays that were staples of the 30s and 40s. He created Sam Spade of The Maltese Falcon, Nick and Nora Charles of the Thin Man series, and more. His novels were of course made into some of the most popular films of the era, heavily influencing the film noir genre. He'd be nominated for an Oscar for his 1943 screenplay, Watch on the Rhine. Hammett died from lung cancer at age 66. Next up here at Arlington, we find an actress named Faye Bainter. She won an Oscar for her supporting role in 1938's Jezebel alongside Bette Davis. She'd also be nominated for her roles in White Banners and The Children's Hour. Having won the Oscar the year before, Faye was also the one to present the Academy Award to Hattie McDaniel in 1940. Faye died from pneumonia at age 74. As we wrap up our time here in Arlington today, it goes without saying that everyone in these grounds is a star in their own right, worthy of our grateful remembrance.
Ready? Face!
Moving on now, we arrive at Thornrose Cemetery in Staunton to find the grave of Harold Reid. He was a founding member and bass singer in the quartet known as the Statler Brothers, who found popularity in the 60s and 70s, including singing with Johnny Cash. They'd become one of the most awarded acts in country music, being named the Vocal Group of the Year by Country Music Association 9 times, including 6 consecutive years. They'd also be inducted into the Country Music and Gospel Halls of Fame. Harold died from kidney failure at age 80. No visit to Richmond, Virginia would be complete without a trip to the magnificent Hollywood Cemetery. And I'm not just saying that because of its name, it's a must-see. A lot of history in these grounds, much of it relating to America's most tumultuous period, hosting thousands of Civil War dead. Among those resting here is a writer named Douglas Freeman. The author and journalist would win Pulitzer Prizes for his multi-volume biographies of George Washington and Robert E. Lee. His biographies would become some of the definitive of the Revolutionary War and Civil War eras. Freeman died shortly after completing his 6th volume on George Washington. He was 67. And yes, there are also a few presidents here. We found James Monroe last time, and this time we'll find John Tyler. He was the 10th President of the United States between 1841 and 1845. He was the first Vice President to succeed to the presidency after the death of his predecessor, when William Henry Harrison died in office just 31 days after his inauguration. After his presidency, Tyler joined the Confederacy. He lived to be 71. Speaking of the Confederacy, there's also a Confederate president here, the first and only, actually. After the South seceded and declared war on the Union, Jefferson Davis would serve as the only president of the Confederate States from 1861 to 1865. After the Confederacy fell at the end of the Civil War, Jefferson Davis was imprisoned and indicted for treason against the United States, though he was never tried. He became a hero of the Lost Cause Confederacy and celebrated in the South, but in recent years, monuments to Jefferson Davis have gradually been removed and renamed due to his association with the slaveholding ideology of the Confederacy. After his death at age 81, he was originally interred in New Orleans, but years later was reburied here in Richmond at his widow's request. While in Richmond, let's head back to Shockoe Hill Cemetery, a cemetery very close to my heart, as this is where we spent a good amount of time in our Edgar Allan Poe special. His foster parents and last fiancée are buried here. Just a few rows away from Poe's foster parents, the Allens, we find a man named Peter Francisco. The Portuguese immigrant settled in Virginia and would become a hero of the American Revolution. A blacksmith by trade, he grew to massive size and strength, around 6'8" and 260 pounds, coming to be known as the Virginian Hercules. His feats became the stuff of legend during the Revolutionary War, including reportedly picking up the barrel of a 1,000-pound cannon and hauling it on his back off the battlefield. He'd become a national hero with books written about him and monuments placed to him. Francisco died from appendicitis at the age of 70. Also here, not far from Poe's last fiancée, is a woman named Elizabeth Van Lew, a fascinating character from the Civil War era. Elizabeth lived in Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, but was staunchly anti-slavery. When the Civil War broke out, she began working on behalf of the Union, caring for wounded soldiers, then organizing and operating an extensive spy network to aid the Union by passing along Confederate secrets and troop movements. She developed a cipher system and smuggled out secrets in hollowed-out eggs. When Richmond fell to Union forces in 1865, Elizabeth was the first to raise the American flag in the city. The information she provided was invaluable to the Union's victory. Her epitaph beautifully sums up her life. She risked everything that slavery might be abolished and the Union preserved. Elizabeth died at age 81. At Oakwood Cemetery in Richmond, we find someone connected to George Washington, who we visited earlier. Meet Richard Eubank. As his epitaph states, he was the coxswain of the boat that took George Washington across the Delaware. The coxswain is the crew member who steers the boat. Washington's crossing of the Delaware on a cold Christmas night in 1776 has come to be remembered as one of the great and challenging military operations led by Washington during the war. We'll wind down our time in Virginia at St. Mary's Whitechapel Cemetery to find the grave of an actress named Margaret Sullavan. She was nominated for an Oscar for her role in the 1938 film Three Comrades, but is perhaps best remembered today as Clara in the 1939 film The Shop Around the Corner. She made her last film and TV appearances in 1951 and dedicated much of her later career to performing on stage. She died from an accidental overdose of barbiturates at age 50. Hopping over the border west, we arrive in West Virginia. High on a hill near the little community of Sarah Ann sits the cemetery of the Hatfield family, of the famous Hatfield and McCoy feud that ran from 1863 to about 1890. Here you will find the grave of William Anderson Hatfield, sometimes known as Devil Anse Hatfield. He was the patriarch of the family and a principal participant in the feud against his rival Randolph McCoy of Kentucky. When Hatfield died in 1921, his family commissioned this 8-foot-tall marble statue of him, carved in Italy, to serve as his grave marker. The Hatfield-McCoy feud has been depicted on screen numerous times, including the miniseries in which Hatfield was portrayed by Kevin Costner. Just a brief stop in West Virginia. Let's move along now to North Carolina. Pleasant Grove Baptist Church Cemetery in Ronda welcomes us here as we visit the grave of the last American hero, Junior Johnson. He was a race car driver whose career included 50 NASCAR wins in the 50s and 60s. After retiring from racing, he'd be a racing team owner. And you fans of Pixar's Cars films will remember him as the voice of Junior Moon in Cars 3. He passed away from Alzheimer's at age 88. Next up is the beautiful city of Asheville. Here at Riverside Cemetery, we find two notable writers. First up is Thomas Wolfe. He was a major figure of the Southern Renaissance and an early master of autobiographical fiction. His best-known work is his first novel, Look Homeward, Angel, published in 1929. But his life and career were cut short at age 37 from tuberculosis. His epitaph features excerpts from Look Homeward, Angel and The Web and the Rock. Another notable wordsmith here is a man who went by the name O. Henry, real name William Porter. His stories were known for their naturalist observations, witty narration, and surprise endings. Among his best-known works are the short stories The Gift of the Magi and The Caballero's Way, and the novel Cabbages and Kings. His Cisco Kid from Caballero's Way would be featured in numerous film, television, and comic book adaptations. O. Henry died from cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes, and an enlarged heart. He was just 47. In recent years, people have been known to leave $1.87 in change on his grave, a reference to The Gift of the Magi. The money is then given to local libraries. Yet another notable writer rests here in North Carolina, this one in Chapel Hill. Here lies Betty Smith. She wrote the 1943 bestseller A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. The story has been adapted on screen, including the 1945 film. Betty wrote 4 novels and dozens of plays throughout her career. She lived to be 75. Moving on now, we reach the old Chapel Hill Cemetery. A few famous folks to find here, like Paul Green. He was a playwright known for his historical works that document life in North Carolina in the early 20th century. He received the Pulitzer Prize for his 1927 play In Abraham's Bosom. Other notable plays include The Lost Colony, and Paul's screenplays include The Cabin in the Cotton and State Fair. Paul Green lived to be 87. Here too is Kay Kyser. He was an American band leader and entertainer who was popular from the 30s to the 50s. His band was unique in that individual members of the band were stars in their own right. Among the popular songs that Kay Kyser and his band performed include Three Little Fishes. Kyser also acted in films, mostly appearing as himself, like in That's Right, You're Wrong, You'll Find Out, and Playmates alongside John Barrymore. Kyser lived to be 80. He rests here alongside his wife, Georgia Carroll, who often sang in Kyser's band as a featured vocalist. She was also a model and actress, appearing in musical films like Carolina Blues, Navy Blues, and Yankee Doodle Dandy. Georgia lived to be 91. Next up is a man who was something of a YouTuber before YouTube was even invented, Charles Kuralt. He was a journalist remembered for his On the Road series, a travelogue he developed upon the idea of rolling down the Great American Highway just to see what they could see. The popular series featured human interest, real life, and curiosities across America. Throughout his career, Kuralt would win 3 Peabody Awards and 10 Emmys for journalism. And in 1996, Charles Kuralt was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. He lived to be 62, passing away from heart failure in 1997. This is Sunset Cemetery in Shelby, North Carolina. Here we find the impressive monument to Don Gibson. Don was a songwriter and country musician known for standards like Sweet Dreams and I Can't Stop Loving You. He enjoyed a string of hits in the 50s to the 70s, and his songs would be covered by other artists hundreds of times, including Ray Charles. Don was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001. He lived to be 75. Catawba Cemetery is in Hickory, the final resting place of Bobby Isaac, another one for you fans of car racing. He made his first NASCAR appearance in 1961 and quickly rose to become one of the toughest racers of the 60s and 70s. He'd be NASCAR's Grand National Series champion in 1970. Bobby died from a heart attack at just 43 after suffering heat exhaustion during a race. He'd later be named as one of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers and was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. If wrestling is more your speed, there's one for you here at West Lawn Memorial Park in China Grove. Here lies Crash Holly, real name Michael Lockwood. He was a professional wrestler who made his debut in 1989 and competed on the independent circuit before making his WWF debut in 1999 as Crash Holly. He won the WWF Hardcore Championship on 22 occasions and also won the WWF World Tag Team Championship with his cousin. His death at age 32 after consuming prescription drugs and alcohol was ruled a suicide. In Kannapolis is Center Grove Lutheran Cemetery and the grave of Ralph Earnhardt. He was a stock car racer and patriarch of the Earnhardt racing family. Earnhardt ranks among NASCAR's all-time winningest drivers with over 350 NASCAR-sanctioned victories. He'd be named one of NASCAR's greatest drivers and be inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame. He retired in 1973 and that same year passed away suddenly from a heart attack at just 45. You fans of Jaws will know this next one. Here at Oakdale Cemetery is Murray Hamilton. The character actor made appearances in many of the great film and TV shows of the 50s to the 70s, like Anatomy of a Murder as Alphonse, The Graduate as Mr. Robinson, and perhaps most notably as Vaughn, Mayor of Amity, in Jaws and Jaws 2. He died from lung cancer at age 63. And look, even Jaws himself came to pay Murray a visit. Our last North Carolina entry is a man uniquely named Wolfman Jack. He was a popular disc jockey in the 60s to the 90s, known for his gravelly voice and Wolfman howl. At his peak, Wolfman Jack was heard on more than 2,000 radio stations across 53 countries. As his notoriety grew, he began making appearances on film and television, often as disc jockeys or versions of himself, including in American Graffiti. Wolfman Jack died suddenly from a heart attack at the age of 57, shortly after finishing a weekly broadcast. From North to South Carolina, this is Tabernacle Baptist Church in Beaufort. Meet Robert Smalls. Born into slavery here in South Carolina, he freed himself, his crew, and their families during the American Civil War by commandeering a Confederate transport ship in Charleston Harbor and sailing it from Confederate-controlled waters of the harbor to the U.S. blockade that surrounded it. He then piloted the ship to the Union-controlled enclave in Beaufort, Port Royal, Hilton Head area, where it became a Union warship. His example and persuasion helped convince Abraham Lincoln to accept African-American soldiers into the Union Army. He became a hero in the North, well known for his daring exploits. After the war, he became a politician, winning election into the United States House of Representatives during Reconstruction. Smalls lived to be 75, passing away from malaria and diabetes. Moving on to Mount Hope Cemetery in Florence, we find the grave of Melvin Purvis. He was an FBI agent, notorious for his role in helping capture and kill bank robbers John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd in the 1930s. During and after the war, he worked to help organize the War Crimes Division and was tasked with locating high-ranking Nazis accused of war crimes, then helping establish the protocols for the Nuremberg trials. In 1960, Purvis was found dead of a gunshot wound. His death was investigated as a potential suicide, but remains mysterious to this day. Purvis would be portrayed in numerous crime drama films. Lakeview Cemetery is in Clover, South Carolina. Here lies Lee Thompson Young. The actor played the title character in Disney's The Famous Jet Jackson in the 90s and early 2000s. He also played Barry Frost on Rizzoli and Isles. And on film you saw Lee as Chris in Friday Night Lights and Delmar in The Hills Have Eyes 2. Lee struggled with mental illness and took his own life at the age of 29. His family launched the Lee Thompson Young Foundation in an effort to help remove the stigma of openly discussing and addressing mental illness. Time to say farewell to South Carolina and hello to Tennessee. Pour yourself a mimosa because that's the name of our first cemetery here in Lawrenceburg. Here we find Fred Thompson. He was a senator from Tennessee from 1994 to 2003 and also ran for president. He brought his years of experience as an attorney and political leader to the big screen with a notable acting career from the 80s into the 2000s, often playing authority figures. He played Admiral Bainter in The Hunt for Red October, Tom in Cape Fear, and Trudeau in Die Hard 2. On television, he played D.A. Arthur Branch on Law & Order. Fred died from lymphoma at the age of 73. Glenwood Cemetery is our next stop to find the grave of Archie Campbell. He was a writer and comedian known particularly for his work on the country-flavored sketch comedy series Hee Haw. He appeared in more than 200 episodes and also wrote close to 100. Archie also released a number of comedy music albums over the years. He died from a heart attack at age 72. Let's head to Memorial Park Cemetery in Memphis next to find Donald Duck. No, not that one. This is Donald Duck Dunn. He was a musician, a bass player, known for his work in the 60s playing for groups like Booker T and the MGs, and on thousands of records including hits by artists like Otis Redding, Bill Withers, Eric Clapton, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley, and even the Blues Brothers. Donald would be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and was named one of Bass Player magazine's 100 greatest bass players of all time. He lived to be 70. Also here we find the crypt of Sam Phillips. Sam was a disc jockey, songwriter, and record producer. He founded the famed Sun Records and Sun Studio here in Memphis, where he produced recordings by Roy Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and Elvis Presley. Sun Studio playing a major role in Elvis's early career. As such, Sam was a key figure in the early development of rock and roll in the 50s. He lived to be 80 and was part of the first group of inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Also here in Memphis is Forest Hill Cemetery, which you Elvis buffs will remember as the original resting place of Elvis Presley and his mother before they were moved to Graceland. Here at Forest Hill is Bill Black. He was a bass player notable for backing Elvis Presley as the Blue Moon Boys. Together they defined rock and roll in the early Sun Records recordings, like That's All Right Mama.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right for you.
He'd go on to record other hits with Elvis, including Hound Dog and Heartbreak Hotel. Bill was just 39 when he died from a brain tumor. If you've ever stayed in a Holiday Inn hotel, you can thank this man, Kemmons Wilson. He founded the hotel chain Holiday Inn in the 1950s, the first location being right here in Memphis. Wilson lived to be 90. The musical history continues to run deep here in Tennessee, and we find more of it at Ridgecrest Cemetery and the crypt of Carl Perkins. The rockabilly great and pioneer of rock and roll also started his career at Sun Studio in Memphis in the 1950s. Among his best-known hits is Blue Suede Shoes, which would later be covered by Elvis.
You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoes.
Perkins would be nicknamed the King of Rockabilly and would be inducted into numerous halls of fame, including the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He died after a series of strokes at age 65. Like Memphis, music history also runs deep here in Nashville, where we've visited quite a few music legends in past videos. Let's remember a few more here today. This is Spring Hill Cemetery in Nashville. Here lies Roy Acuff. In his day, he was known as the King of Country Music, credited for helping morph country music from the string band hoedown format to the singer-based format that it would become. His career began in the 30s and he gained fame as part of the Smoky Mountain Boys. In 1962, Roy became the first living inductee into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He died from heart failure at age 89. Nearby, we find Earl Scruggs, a noted bluegrass musician who developed his distinctive three-finger banjo picking style, now known as Scruggs style. He would pair up with Lester Flatt as Flatt and Scruggs in the 40s, recording the enduring track Foggy Mountain Breakdown. They would also make their mark on television, performing the theme from the Beverly Hillbillies.
California is a place you ought to be, so they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is.
Scruggs was inducted into the International Bluegrass Hall of Fame and lived to be 88. At Hendersonville Memory Gardens, where previously we found legends like Johnny Cash and June Carter, is another notable country music star, Jean Shepard. She's considered one of the genre's early female stars, the first female in country music to sell 1 million records. She had numerous hits in songs like A Satisfied Mind and the duet A Dear John Letter. Jean joined the Grand Ole Opry in 1955 and remained a member for the next 61 years, the only female to have been a member for more than 60 years. Jean lived to be 82. Next up is Hermitage Memorial Gardens in Old Hickory. Here lies a legend of the pool table, Minnesota Fats, real name Rudolph Wanderone. At the height of his career, he was the most famous pool player in the United States. He adopted the nickname Minnesota Fats from the character in the 1961 film The Hustler, which he claimed was based on him. He parlayed his fame at the pool table into books and television appearances. And in 1984, Fats was inducted into the Billiard Congress of America Hall of Fame. He lived to be 82. His epitaph reads, "Beat every living creature on earth. St. Peter, rack 'em up." Back to the music world, we stop in at Calvary Cemetery in Nashville to find Eddie Rabbitt. He was a country music songwriter and performer, rising to prominence in the 70s and 80s. His first big success was writing Kentucky Rain for Elvis Presley. He would also find success as a performer with hits like I Love a Rainy Night.
'Cause I love a rainy night. Yeah, I love a rainy night.
As well as his duet with Crystal Gayle, You and I. Eddie Rabbitt died from lung cancer at age 56. Mountain View Cemetery is in McMinnville. Here lies Dottie West. She too was a popular country music singer and songwriter. Her 1964 song Here Comes My Baby won her a Grammy Award, making her the first female country music singer to win the honor.
Here comes my baby back again.
Other hits include Country Sunshine and her duet with Kenny Rogers, Every Time Two Fools Collide. She also had a minor career as an actress, appearing on shows like The Love Boat. Dottie's life was cut short in an automobile accident en route to a performance at the Grand Ole Opry in 1991. She was 58. If you have wanderlust and exploring is your passion, then you have a kindred spirit in Meriwether Lewis, resting here at Pioneer Cemetery in Hohenwald. He is the Lewis in Lewis and Clark. He was the leader of the Lewis and Clark expedition, whose mission it was to explore the territory of the Louisiana Purchase and claim the Pacific Northwest for the United States, before the European nations did. The expedition was commissioned by Thomas Jefferson to explore in detail the new territory and find a practical route west. Lewis died just a few years after the expedition from multiple gunshot wounds, believed to have been self-inflicted. He was 35. Our next stop is Wolf River Cemetery in Pall Mall. Here lies Alvin York. If you've seen 1941's Sergeant York, in which York was portrayed by Gary Cooper in an Oscar-winning role, then you'll be curious to know that this is the real Sergeant York. He was one of the most decorated Army soldiers of World War I, receiving the Medal of Honor for leading an attack on German machine gun nests. The 1941 film about his exploits was credited for enhancing American morale as the U.S. mobilized for action in World War II. York died from a cerebral hemorrhage at age 76. Moving on to Macklemoresville Cemetery, where we find the graves of Hal Holbrook and Dixie Carter. Hal was an actor nominated for an Oscar in 2008 for his role in the film Into the Wild. He also won 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, including for playing Abraham Lincoln in the miniseries Lincoln. He'd also appear in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, this time playing Preston Blair. On stage, Hal won a Tony for his portrayal of Mark Twain in the one-man show he developed called Mark Twain Tonight. Hal lived to be 95. He's buried here alongside his wife, Dixie Carter, also an actress. She's particularly known for her television roles, playing Julia on Designing Women, Randy on Family Law, and Gloria on Desperate Housewives, a role that earned her an Emmy nomination. Dixie also had a notable career on Broadway. She died from cancer at age 70. This forest lawn is located in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. Here we find the grave of a musical performer who went by the name String Bean. His distinctive style of comedy and his old-fashioned banjo playing made him a memorable feature on the popular television show Hee Haw. One of his memorable characters on the show was a scarecrow. String Bean developed a distinctive comedic appearance as well, tucking his shirt into his pants belted around his knees, giving him the appearance of a long torso and stubby legs. But his life was cut tragically short in November 1973 after returning home from a performance at the Grand Ole Opry. They were met by burglars in their home, who shot and killed both String Bean and his wife. The culprits were caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. String Bean was 58. During the remaining production of Hee Haw, the scarecrow was left as a memorial. The man who discovered String Bean's murder was a neighbor and fellow country musician. We're at Luton's United Methodist Church Cemetery to find the grave of Grandpa Jones. He played guitar and banjo and sang and yodeled old-timey ballads. He began performing at the Grand Ole Opry in the 40s, and like his friend String Bean, would also become a featured player on Hee Haw. Grandpa Jones was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1978 and passed away after a series of strokes at the age of 84. He's buried alongside his wife Ramona, also a musician. The couple regularly performed together, including at the Grand Ole Opry, and even on Hee Haw quite a few times. She lived to be 91. This is Mount Juliet Cemetery, where we find another notable musician, Vassar Clements. He was a fiddler, dubbed the father of hillbilly jazz, an improvisational style which incorporates elements of swing, jazz, and bluegrass. He also gained recognition for joining Flatt and Scruggs in performing the theme for the Beverly Hillbillies. Vassar was posthumously inducted into the International Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame after passing away from cancer at age 77. Also here in Mount Juliet is the legendary Charlie Daniels. He was a singer, songwriter, fiddler, and pioneer of Southern rock, best known for his #1 country hit, The Devil Went Down to Georgia, which won Daniels the Grammy Award.
But if you lose, the devil gets your soul.
Charlie Daniels' music career spanned nearly 60 years, and he'd become a member of the Grand Ole Opry, as well as an inductee into numerous halls of fame. He died from a stroke at age 83. Moving on to Woodlawn Cemetery in Nashville, we find Marty Robbins, another legend of country western music. From the 40s to the 80s, Marty would become a pioneer of what was known as outlaw country music, which sought to expand the genre outside of the typical Nashville sound. He had his first #1 hit in 1952's I'll Go On Alone. He would follow this up with a string of additional hits, including what is considered his signature song, El Paso, which won him the Grammy Award. He would influence other outlaws like Johnny Cash and was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Marty died from heart failure at just 57. Hollywood Graveyard took a midnight train to Georgia. Let's begin in Atlanta and remember one of the most consequential social reformers of the 20th century, an icon of the civil rights movement of the 60s, Martin Luther King Jr. King advocated for and helped advance civil rights for people of color in the United States through the use of nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience. He fought against Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation in the South and other forms of discrimination. King participated in and led marches for the right to vote, desegregation, labor rights, and other civil rights. He's particularly remembered as one of the leaders of the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
The movement led to legislative gains in the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, and Fair Housing Act. King would be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality in the U.S., as well as the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But it was a tumultuous time in American history, and on April 4th, 1968, King was fatally shot at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was just 39.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
His wife, Coretta Scott King, also entombed here, would carry on his legacy as an activist and civil rights leader herself, dedicating her life to advocate for African American equality. She was also active in the women's movement and advocated for LGBTQ rights as well. Coretta lived to be 78, passing away from complications of cancer in 2006. Next up is Mount Harmony Memorial Gardens. Here we find the grave of Joe South. He was a musician, best known for his 1968 hit Games People Play, which won him a Grammy and was named Song of the Year. He also wrote hits for other artists, like Rose Garden, performed by Lynn Anderson. Joe South died from heart failure at age 72. Oakland Cemetery is also in Atlanta. Continuing our streak of legendary musicians on today's tour, here we find the magnificent tomb of Kenny Rogers. The singer, songwriter, and actor had a career entertaining audiences for more than 6 decades. He charted some 120 hit singles across various genres, mainly country, and sold more than 100 million records during his career. One of his biggest hits would become his signature song, The Gambler, in 1978.
You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up.
He developed his gambler persona into a series of successful made-for-TV movies, beginning with 1980's The Gambler. Kenny received numerous awards and accolades throughout his career, including Grammys, AMAs, CMAs, and induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He even expanded into fast food with Kenny Rogers Roasters. He continued to perform until 2017, before passing away in 2020 at the age of 81. Nearby in this same cemetery is a man named Bobby Jones. If you don't know what he's known for, just take a look at his grave and all the golf balls left here as offerings, or perhaps putted here on the green. Bobby was a Hall of Fame golfer, believed to be one of the most influential in the history of the game. In 1930, he'd become the only player to have won the pre-game Masters Grand Slam, all 4 major championships in the same calendar year. He'd also win the Opens 7 times. After retiring from competitive play, he helped found and design the Augusta National Golf Club and co-founded the Masters Tournament. Bobby lived to be 69. In Macon is Fort Hill Cemetery. We've featured a lot of country music artists today. Well, in these grounds is an early pioneer of the genre. This is the grave of Emmett Miller. He began his career playing minstrel shows in the 20s, singing in an unusual falsetto yodeling style known as his trick voice.
I'll think of you, don't now anytime.
Though his style in that era was more blues and jazzy, it was a style that would influence the next generation of what would become early country music artists, like Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers. Emmett Miller lived to be 62. Another one for you baseball fans can be found here at Rose Hill Cemetery in Royston. Here is the tomb of Ty Cobb. He was a center fielder who played professional baseball for 24 seasons, most with the Detroit Tigers. Cobb is credited with setting 900 MLB records throughout his career, and winning more batting titles than any other player. He hit 300 in a record 23 consecutive seasons and also hit 400 in 3 of them. His combined total of 4,065 runs scored and batted in is still the highest ever produced by a major league player. In 1936, Cobb received the most votes of any player on the inaugural ballot for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and has since ranked 3rd on Sporting News' list of baseball's 100 greatest players. Ty Cobb lived to be 74. There is no shortage of baseball legends here in Georgia. In Atlanta's Southview Cemetery lies another one of Major League Baseball's greatest, Hank Aaron. He played 23 seasons in Major League Baseball from 1954 to 1976, mainly for the Milwaukee, later Atlanta Braves. He's remembered for breaking the long-standing MLB record for career home runs held by Babe Ruth, hitting home run number 715 in April 1974. He remained the career leader for 33 years. Aaron holds numerous other MLB records, was a 25-time All-Star, and was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1982. Hank Aaron died from natural causes at age 86. Here too, we find a singer named William Guest. If you're a fan of Gladys Knight and the Pips, William Guest was one of the Pips. He was a sole singer and member of the group for its entire history, from 1952 to 1989, along with other members who were his cousins. They had hits in tracks like Midnight Train to Georgia.
Oh, that midnight train to Georgia. Get on a midnight train.
Guest died from heart failure at age 74. Next up is Greenlawn Cemetery in Roswell. Here is the crypt of another big personality from the wrestling ring, Ravishing Rick Rude. He was one of wrestling's biggest and brightest stars in the 80s and 90s, performing with the WCW, WWF, and ECW. He'd become a 3-time WCW International World Heavyweight Champion, among many other accomplishments. On April 20th, 1999, Rude was found unconscious. He had suffered heart failure from an overdose of mixed medications at just 40. Rick Rude was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. This is Westview Cemetery, and this distinctive monument belongs to Joel Chandler Harris. He was a writer who, in the post-Civil War era, supported a vision of the New South which stressed regional and racial reconciliation, modernization of society and attitudes, and an end to the slavery-based plantation system of the pre-war period. During this time, he recorded and published the oral traditions of Brer Rabbit, folklore passed down by African Americans in the southern United States. These folk tales were told by the fictional Uncle Remus, a kindly freed man who passes the tales on to children as a form of instruction. The stories were immensely popular in their day, but are not without controversy today, Harris being a white man who chronicled the largely African American traditions. Still, for many, the Uncle Remus stories are an important record of black folklore and life in the post-war South during Reconstruction. Disney would adapt Harris's stories into the 1946 film Song of the South, in which Uncle Remus was portrayed by James Baskett. He would receive an honorary Academy Award for his performance.
If it's whistling a tune or singing a song, they'll all say howdy when you come along.
Howdy,
Good morning. Good morning, girls.
It was also the source material for the Disney park ride Splash Mountain. However, due to concerns over the racial characterizations in the film, Song of the South has never been released after its initial theatrical run, and in recent years, Splash Mountain has been replaced with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Also here's the Mac Daddy of 90s rap, Chris Kelly. I remember being in elementary school when an infectious track hit the radio airwaves and was all the buzz. Chris was half of juvenile rap duo Criss Cross with Chris Smith. At just 12 and 13 years old, they had a smash hit in the 1992 track Jump. As part of their Criss Cross brand, they were known for wearing their pants backwards. They went on to release 3 studio albums. Chris Kelly died tragically young at the age of 34 from an accidental drug overdose. You fans of zombie movies will know this next star, Dwayne Jones. Night of the Living Dead was pioneering not only in its depiction of zombies, but also in its reflection of the social and cultural changes in the US during the 60s. George A. Romero cast Dwayne Jones, a black man, in the lead role. This was the first horror film to star a black actor since 1940's Son of Ingagi, which had an all-black cast. Dwayne played Ben in Night of the Living Dead, the level-headed leader of a group of individuals trapped in a farmhouse menaced by the living dead.
I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But we have to try to board the house up together. Now, I'm going to board up the windows and the doors. Do you understand? We'll be all right here.
Dwayne Jones died from cardiac arrest at just 51. He rests here at Westview Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. For our last Georgia stop, let's visit Andersonville National Cemetery to remember American prisoners of war at Stalag 17, a German prison camp in Austria during World War II. The experiences of Edmund Trzynski and Donald Bevan at the camp were adapted into a Broadway play called Stalag 17. The play would later be made into a film, Stalag 17, starring William Holden, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. Florida is up next. This is Samford Cemetery in Riverview. Meet Al Tomaini. He was a sideshow performer with gigantism, one of the world's tallest men, claiming a height upwards of 8 feet 5 inches. Al was working in a circus in the Great Lakes Expedition when he met his future wife, Jeannie Smith, who was billed as the half-girl, standing 2'6" with no legs. From then on, they were billed as the world's strangest married couple. Al died at the age of 50 after undergoing surgery for a pituitary tumor. In Orlando, we reach Woodlawn Memorial Park. Here lies Dave Peverett. He was a British rock musician, the guitarist and singer for Savoy Brown, and the lead singer and rhythm guitarist of Foghat. They released a number of successful records, including the platinum-selling Fool for the City in 1975, which featured their hit single, Slow Ride.
Slow ride. Take it easy.
Dave died from kidney cancer at the age of 56. Forest Hills Memorial Park is in Palm City. This is the crypt of Anthony Newley. He was an actor, songwriter, and singer, sometimes thought of as a modern British Al Jolson. He was one of Broadway's great leading men in the 50s and 60s. He would also score dozens of hits in songs he wrote, including What Kind of Fool Am I and Feeling Good. For film, Anthony co-wrote the title song for Goldfinger. He also co-wrote the score and songs for the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, including those timeless hits The Candy Man and Pure Imagination.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
The score would be nominated for an Academy Award. Anthony also acted in close to 80 film and television productions over his career, including 1967's Dr. Dolittle alongside Rex Harrison. He died from cancer at age 67. We've reached Miami and Graceland Memorial Park. Here we find the crypt of Rolando Barral. He was a Cuban actor and television host, appearing in dozens of telenovelas and series for more than 40 years. He was host of the long-running talk show El Show de Rolando Barral, the first Spanish-language talk show on American television. It earned him the nickname the Latino Johnny Carson. He died from a stroke at age 62. Nearby is Vista Memorial Gardens. In the Bluebell Mausoleum is the crypt of the man with the most magnificent blonde pompadour in music history, Wayne Cochran. He was a flamboyant singer known as the White Knight of Soul. With his band CC Riders, he released 7 albums, including his best-known song, Last Kiss, which has since been covered by numerous artists, including Pearl Jam.
Well, where can my baby be? Lord, took her away from me.
Wayne died from cancer at age 78. Star of David Memorial Gardens is in Fort Lauderdale. Here lies Art Mitrano. He was a comedic actor, remembered for his role as Mauser in the 80s films Police Academy 2 and Police Academy 3. He also played Da Vinci in History of the World Part 1. Art was also known for his television appearances doing absurd hand magic tricks while humming Fine and Dandy, referenced right here on his marker. Art died from natural causes at age 84. This distinctive vista comes to us from Westview Cemetery in Pompano Beach. In a previous video, we visited TV legend Esther Rold here, famous for her role as Florida on Good Times. Also here are 2 of Esther's sisters, who were also actresses. Rosanna Carter was born in the Bahamas and during the Harlem Renaissance acted at New Lafayette Theater as one of the Lafayette Players, before making her way to the Broadway stage. Film and television followed, playing Judge Brown in She-Devil and Eulalia Jefferson on I'll Fly Away, which earned her an Emmy nomination. Rosanna lived to be 98. Eldest sister Estelle Evans is best known for her role as Calpurnia in 1962's To Kill a Mockingbird. Other notable roles include in The Learning Tree, which earned her an NAACP Image Award. Estelle also made an appearance alongside her sister on Good Times. Oaklawn Cemetery is in Jacksonville, Florida. Here lies Pat Frank. He was a journalist and author, considered the first post-Hiroshima doomsday author. His best-known work is the 1959 novel Alas, Babylon, which depicts the outbreak of nuclear war and the struggles of its survivors. The story would be dramatized on television's Playhouse 90 in 1960. Other of his writings would be adapted on screen, including Hold Back the Night and Man's Favorite Sport. He died from acute pancreatitis at age 57. Also here at Oaklawn is Connie Haynes. The singer and actress is remembered for being a featured vocalist during the big band era, alongside the likes of Frank Sinatra, Harry James, and Tommy Dorsey. She'd be a regular performer on Abbott and Costello's radio show, then made her way to the big screen, acting in films like Twilight on the Prairie and Duchess of Idaho. Haynes died from myasthenia gravis at age 87. Our next stop is Mims and LaGrange Cemetery. Here we find the graves of Harry and Harriet Moore. They were educators and civil rights activists in Florida. Harry founded the first branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in Brevard County, Florida. He investigated lynchings, filed lawsuits against voter registration barriers, and fought for equal pay for black teachers. Moore's efforts led to a significant increase in black voter registration. Harriet was a black teacher in a segregated Florida and supported her husband's efforts in winning equal rights for African Americans. On Christmas night 1951, a bomb that had been planted in their home exploded, killing Harry instantly. Harriet succumbed to her injuries 9 days later. They would be the first martyrs of the movement. Their murders have never been solved, but investigators generally believe they were the targets of the Ku Klux Klan. We're in Sarasota now, and Sarasota Memorial Park. Meet Otto Griebling. He was a circus clown, a silent tramp clown in the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. His sad and sassy antics were a hit with audiences for decades. Otto would be inducted into the International Circus Hall of Fame and the International Clown Hall of Fame. He died from a stroke at age 75. For our last Florida stop, we spend a little time in the land of Oz to remember an actor named Jackie Gerlich. Like his neighbor here at Sarasota, he worked as a clown in the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. He's best remembered today as a member of the Lollipop Guild in 1939's Wizard of Oz, the one in red. Jackie also played Bobby in East Side of Heaven. Jackie was just 43 when he died from what was said to be natural causes. Continuing our way through the South, we arrive in Alabama. We've featured a lot of baseball stars today. How about a football star, one whose name actually was Starr? Bart Starr, whose tomb can be found here in Southern Heritage Cemetery in Pelham, Alabama. He was a professional football quarterback for the Green Bay Packers from 1956 to 1971. He led his team to 3 consecutive league championships and victories in the first 2 Super Bowls, at which he would be named MVP. After retiring from playing, he'd be coach and administrator for the Packers. Starr was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1977 and lived to be 85, passing away in 2019 after a period of failing health. Next up is Asheville Cemetery. Here lies Howard Hill. He was an expert bowman, billed for decades as the world's greatest archer. He won an impressive 196 bow and arrow tournaments, and it wouldn't be long until his skills were called upon by filmmakers. He was a supporting actor, trick shot performer, and archery advisor for Hollywood films. Perhaps most notably, he played Elwyn the Welshman and performed many of the archery stunts in 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood. Hill made what is perhaps the most iconic bow and arrow trick shot in movie history, splitting the arrow in Robin Hood. Moving on to Huntsville and Maple Hill Cemetery. This is the grave of Harry Towns. He was a prolific actor, seen in more than 180 film and television roles throughout his career, particularly known for his work in television. He made guest appearances on practically every show from the 50s into the 80s. Notable among his many appearances were episodes of Perry Mason, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, The Fugitive, Star Trek, The Incredible Hulk, The Twilight Zone, Knots Landing, and many, many more. He did appear in a few films as well, including playing Mr. Noel in Fitzwilly. He retired from acting in 1989 and returned to Huntsville, where he lived until the age of 86. Greenwood is our next Alabama stop, in Montgomery. You may have surmised from Curly Williams' grave that he was a musician, a country and western musician and songwriter to be specific. Being from Georgia, he formed a band called the Georgia Peach Pickers. They were invited to join the Grand Ole Opry in 1942 and was the first to introduce the steel guitar to the Opry stage. Williams' best-known song is Half As Much, written in 1950. Curly Williams was just 57 when he died. Our next Greenwood star was also a musician and opera singer named Nell Rankin. She was a mezzo-soprano who spent much of her career at the Metropolitan Opera from 1951 to 1976. She was admired for her portrayals of Amneris in Verdi's Aida and the title role in Bizet's Carmen. Nell died from a rare form of blood cancer at age 81. Our last Alabama stop brings us to the grave of a character actor named Sam Reese. His best-known role was that of the clerk in the 1967 film In the Heat of the Night. Other films include Rat King, and he had numerous television appearances, including on The Outer Limits, The Andy Griffith Show, and Dr. Kildare. Sam died from a stroke at age 55. Farewell, Alabama. Hello, Arkansas. Let's kick off our time here at Brearley Cemetery. Here we find the grave of Bonnie Brown. She was a country music singer, a member of the Browns, a sibling trio popular in the 50s and 60s. The Browns joined the Grand Ole Opry in 1963. The trio's biggest hit was the 1959 folk pop single The Three Bells, which reached #1 on the Billboard charts. The group disbanded in 1967, after which Bonnie decided to retire from performing. The Browns were inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2015. Bonnie died the following year from lung cancer at the age of 77. We find another of the Brown siblings at Memorial Park Cemetery in Pine Bluff. Here lies Maxine Brown. With sister Bonnie and brother Jim, the trio embodied the close harmony of the Nashville sound in the 50s and 60s. They'd perform on The Ed Sullivan Show and American Bandstand, and followed up their hit The Three Bells with other popular songs, including Scarlet Ribbons for Her Hair. The Browns disbanded in 1967, but on the rare occasion in the later decades would reunite for a performance. Maxine died from heart and kidney disease at age 87. Driving through Green Forest along the quiet State Road 103, blink and you'll miss Cisco Cemetery, a serene pastoral setting flanked by grazing cattle. Among the few dozen graves here are Helen Gurley Brown and David Brown. Helen was an author and publisher, as well as the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine for 32 years. In 1962, she published the book Sex and the Single Girl, which stayed on the bestseller list for over a year. The book inspired the 1964 film of the same name, starring Natalie Wood. Her work was part of what became the sexual revolution. Helen lived to be 90. She was married to film and theater producer David Brown. He began his career as a journalist before making his way to Hollywood in the 50s. He teamed up with Richard Zanuck to produce a number of notable films, the first of which was 1973's The Sting, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture. The Zanuck-Brown Company had a hand in launching the career of a young filmmaker named Steven Spielberg, producing his first feature, The Sugarland Express, and then the following year, producing Jaws. He would be nominated for 4 Oscars for Jaws, The Verdict, A Few Good Men, and Chocolat. David Brown died from kidney failure at age 93. Another Greenwood on the itinerary today, this one found in Hot Springs, Arkansas. This is the grave of Chester Lauk. He was a comedic actor who played the character of Lum Edwards on the classic radio comedy Lum and Abner in the 30s to the 50s. So popular was the series, they took their characters to the big screen in 7 feature films between 1940 and 1956. Chester lived to be 78. Also here at Greenwood is an opera singer named Marjorie Lawrence. She was an Australian dramatic soprano, noted particularly for her roles in the works of Wagner, who found fame in the 30s and the 40s. Her life story was told in the 1955 film Interrupted Melody, in which she was portrayed by Eleanor Parker, who was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance. Marjorie Lawrence died of heart failure at age 71. Welcome to historic Oak Grove Cemetery. Here lies a drummer named Tommy Porkchop Markham. He's best known for being Conway Twitty's drummer for some 31 years. He'd also write lyrics for some of Twitty's popular songs. Porkchop died from complications of diabetes at the age of 52. We're in Little Rock now, and the National Cemetery. In these hallowed grounds is Dick Hogan. The actor appeared in 40 films in the 30s and the 40s. Notable among them are as Bob Wilson in Annapolis Salute and David in Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. He retired from acting in 1948 and returned home to Arkansas, where he lived to be 77. The last state we'll visit today is Louisiana. We'll start in Baton Rouge and Green Oaks Memorial Park. Here we find another one for you football fans, Jim Taylor. He played in the NFL as a fullback for 10 seasons, from 1958 to 1967, with the Green Bay Packers and the New Orleans Saints. He was part of the Packers team that won the very first Super Bowl. Taylor was also named MVP in 1962, and that same year was rushing yards leader. He He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1976 and lived to be 83. Next is West Lawn in Grenta. Into the Chapel of Faith, we find the crypt of Frankie Ford. He was a rock and roll musician and singer who had a top 20 hit in 1959 with his track, Sea Cruise. Ford continued to record and perform into the 90s and would be inducted into the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. He died at age 76 in 2015. His death date has yet to be added to the crypt. This magnificent mausoleum is found at Lake Lawn Park Cemetery in New Orleans. Herein we find Severn Darden. The actor and comedian got his start as a founding member of the Chicago-based comedy troupe The Second City in the 50s and 60s. He'd make his way to film and television in the 60s with guest spots on shows like Car 54 Where Are You and The Monkees, and in films like The President's Analyst, and in several Planet of the Apes films as Culp. Severn died from heart failure at age 65. Greenwood Cemetery is also in New Orleans. Here lies actress Marion Zinser. She had only 9 film and TV credits to her name, but a few were quite memorable. She played the Bayou Woman in 2005's The Skeleton Key and Mrs. Horton in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. She also played Elvis's grandma on the TV miniseries in 2005. Marion lived to be 92. No tombstone tour of New Orleans would be complete without a stop at Metairie Cemetery. We've visited quite a few famous folks here in previous videos. Let's find a few more today. Stone fleur-de-lis welcome us to the tomb of Tom Benson, fitting as the businessman was the owner of the NFL team, the New Orleans Saints, whose logo is the fleur-de-lis. As owner, he had a Super Bowl victory with the Saints in 2009. He also owned the NBA's New Orleans Pelicans. Tom also supported philanthropic causes such as cancer research. He lived to be 90. Next up here at Metairie, we find one for you vampire fans. This is the tomb of Anne Rice. She was perhaps the most famous author of Gothic fiction of her generation. Her notable works include The Vampire Chronicles, Lives of the Mayfair Witches, and Exit to Eden. Her work has been adapted on screen numerous times, including Exit to Eden in 1994 and Interview with the Vampire that same year. 2002's Queen of the Damned was also based on The Vampire Chronicles. The TV series Mayfair Witches was also recently produced by AMC, as well as the new Interview with the Vampire series. Her books have sold over 100 million copies, making her one of the modern era's best-selling authors. She died from complications of a stroke at age 80 and is entombed here alongside her husband Stan, a poet and artist. Also here among all these distinctive above-ground tombs we find Dorothy Dell. She was an actress on the rise in the 30s, beginning her career on the Broadway stage, including in the Ziegfeld Follies. She moved to Hollywood in 1933 and right off the bat landed 3 leading lady roles in Wharf Angel, Little Miss Marker, and Shoot the Works, all in 1934. But Dorothy's life and promising career were cut tragically short in 1934 when she died in an automobile accident. She was just 19. This is the grave of an actress named Cora Witherspoon. Her career on stage and screen spanned some 5 decades. After notable turns in long-running Broadway plays in the 20s, she began making films in the 1930s, where she found her niche playing haughty society women. Notable roles include as Mrs. Burns Norval in Libeled Lady, Carrie in Dark Victory, and Mrs. Van Adams in The Women. Cora lived to be 67. The soundtrack of Louisiana is a jazzy one, and here in Baton Rouge's Rose Lawn Memorial Park we find one of that soundtrack's great pianists. Here lies Bill Evans, one of jazz music's most notable piano players. He formed a jazz trio in 1959, a group now regarded as a seminal modern jazz trio. Some of Bill Evans' compositions have since become standards, like Waltz for Debbie and Time Remembered. In the 1970s, Bill would also collaborate with Tony Bennett on 2 critically acclaimed albums. Throughout his career, he received 31 Grammy nominations, winning 7. He died at just 51 from a combination of an ulcer, cirrhosis, pneumonia, and hepatitis. Also here is an actor named Harold Hertham. He had only about a dozen roles to his name, but a few of them were quite memorable. He played the doctor in Forrest Gump who gave Forrest his magic legs. He also played the coroner in JFK. Harold lived to be 69. Calvary Cemetery is in Lafayette. Here lies a man who went by the unique moniker Buckwheat Zydeco. He was a musician, an accordion player to be precise. He took his stage name from the style of music he played, a mix of rhythm and blues with traditional Creole. He was one of the few Zydeco musicians to achieve mainstream success. His band even performed at the closing ceremonies of the 1996 Summer Olympics to an audience of billions, and performed regularly on television as well. And as noted here on his stone, Buckwheat was also a Grammy and Emmy winner. He died from lung cancer at age 68. Moving on to Shiloh Baptist Church Cemetery in Morningsport, we continue our exploration of the history of music in Louisiana. Here's the grave of Leadbelly. He was a folk and blues singer, a multi-instrumentalist, playing 12-string guitar, also piano, mandolin, harmonica, and melodeon. Leadbelly popularized traditional folk songs like In the Pines, and wrote his own songs as well, like the hit Goodnight Irene. You've heard his music in countless productions over the years, from The Dick Van Dyke Show to Licorice Pizza. And as noted here on his stone, Leadbelly was inducted into numerous halls of fame. He lived to be 61. This is Hillcrest Cemetery in Red Chute. Meet Johnny Horton. From the guitar here on his grave, you probably guessed that he too was a musician. Johnny was a country, honky-tonk, and rockabilly musician in the 50s, who shot to fame with his hit single, The Battle of New Orleans, which won the Grammy Award and was awarded the Grammy Hall of Fame, in addition to being named one of the songs of the century. He had other hits in the 60s, his music often sharing an historical narrative. At the height of his career, Johnny died in a car accident at just 35, and would be posthumously inducted into the Rockabilly Hall of Fame and the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. Centuries Memorial Park is in Shreveport. Here lies Claude King, another country music singer and songwriter who had a hit in 1962 with his million-selling Wolverton Mountain. The song stayed at number 1 for 9 weeks on the country charts and even found crossover appeal, hitting the top 10 in the Billboard Hot 100. Claude also had a few acting roles, including playing Sheriff Cutler in Swamp Girl. He lived to be 90. With Louisiana's proud musical heritage that we've explored today, let's make our last stop of the day at Heron Family Cemetery in Clayton to find a legend of rock and roll. This is the grave of Jerry Lee Lewis. He was rock and roll's first great wild man, known for his bombastic performances on the piano, sometimes playing with both his hands and his feet. The pioneer of rock and roll and rockabilly began making recordings in the 1950s at Memphis's famed Sun Records. His 1957 hit, Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On, would rocket him to international stardom.
Come on over, whole lot of shaking going on. Shake! Shake! Buddy, shake!
He followed this up with other major hits, like Great Balls of Fire, which ranks among Rolling Stone magazine's greatest songs ever.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will. But what a thrill, goodness and gracious, great balls of fire.
In later years, Jerry Lee Lewis also found success in country music. Lewis would be inducted into multiple halls of fame, including the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and even had a movie made about his life in which he was portrayed by Dennis Quaid. He's remembered today as one of the greatest musical artists of the 20th century. Jerry Lee Lewis passed away in 2022 at the age of 87. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.